The end of the French and Indian War in North America changed the landscape of the continent forever. France had been decisively defeated in the colonies, and never again would they have the same power or influence as they once did. Spain, and especially Britain, came to total dominance over the affairs of North America. From the Hudson Bay to the southern tip of Florida, Britain's nominal influence stretched the entire Atlantic coastline. However, in just a few short decades, the British would lose their stranglehold on the continent as they inadvertently began a series of conflicts and uprisings collectively referred to as the transatlantic revolutions. While Britain had defeated France, they had largely done so thanks to the efforts of their settlers in the 13 colonies of the Atlantic coast that made up Britain's primary base of power in the region. Rather than rewarding the colonists for their efforts against the French and their Native American allies, the British Parliament instead levied heavy taxes on the colonists to pay off the massive debt they had accrued during the war with France, prevented further settlement of British colonists in the lands conquered from France, and gave the French Catholics of Canada rights. Waves of unrest followed as British soldiers massacred citizens in Boston in 1770, imposed even heavier taxes, sent more soldiers to garrison the colonies, and prevented the rising New England bourgeoisie from trading with anyone except Britain, and only then at rates unfavorable to them. After years of underlying tensions, they finally exploded in April of 1775 when so-called Patriot militias seized armories at Lexington and conquered and defeated the British regulars, driving them back to the city of Boston. After the opening shots of the American Revolutionary War, British forces found themselves initially on the back foot. Patriots under the command of George Washington defeated the British Army under General William Howe at the Battle of Bunker Hill in June of 1775 and drove them out of Boston. Further British garrisons faced similar defeats across the southern colonies, until by 1776, the Patriots had forced the British out of all of the 13 colonies. As the Patriots drove the British out of the 13 colonies, they also began to establish a common government through which they could effectively prosecute the war, negotiate with foreign powers, and eventually make peace with Britain on some terms favorable to them. The First Continental Congress, convened in 1774 in the city of Philadelphia, had already decided that the rule they were subjected to by Britain was outrageous and could not be accepted. However, two major factions arose within this first Congress as to how to resolve the issue. Conservatives, led by Joseph Galloway, were of the mind that the 13 colonies should compromise with Britain and reach an equitable arrangement where both sides could continue to remain on amicable terms within the empire. Patriot radicals, led by Patrick Henry, were beginning to envision the 13 colonies as independent of British rule entirely and attempted to get this through the Congress. Unfortunately for them, Galloway's faction carried the day, and the First Continental Congress chose to impose a boycott on British goods in 1774 while attempting to negotiate a settlement. When war between Britain and the colonies broke out, the First Continental Congress's ruling was upended entirely. As such, the Second Continental Congress was summoned in Philadelphia to determine the new course for the rapidly developing revolution. With the war carrying on in a sporadic and uncoordinated manner, the Second Continental Congress was forced to take up the leadership of the war, voting the Continental Army under the command of George Washington into existence just before he drove the British out of Boston in 1775. Even with the outbreak of war, the Congress initially tried to affirm their loyalty to the Crown, but when King George III declared the colonies to be in a state of open and avowed rebellion, the radical patriots seized control of the situation. These radicals, such as Patrick Henry, John Adams, Richard Henry Lee, and Thomas Jefferson, pushed for the colonies to declare independence until finally they drafted and signed the Declaration of Independence, uniting all 13 colonies under the authority of the Congress and declaring their unanimous independence from Britain. The jubilant and defiant attitude of the Patriots was broken when General Howe returned in July to seize the city of New York. Though the Patriots put up a strong defense, the British were able to drive the Patriots out of the city and into New Jersey, seizing most of the state and the lower Hudson. In addition, British forces began advancing from Quebec through Lake Champlain, threatening to cut the Patriot forces in New England off from the other colonies. Through the remainder of 1776, Patriot morale declined sharply, as did the size of Washington's Continental Army. In December, as British regulars and German mercenaries sat on the eastern banks of the Delaware River across from Philadelphia, the Continental Congress retreated from the city to Baltimore. It was in this perilous moment when General Washington led one of his most daring attacks against the British forces stationed in Trenton. On Christmas night, 1776, as the Hessian mercenaries stationed in Trenton were asleep, Washington crossed the Delaware in secrecy, and the morning after the Hessians woke up to being surrounded and attacked by Patriot forces on all sides. After their near immediate surrender, Washington then turned his attention to the British regulars at Princeton. The Battle of Princeton in January 1777 was small, but a major victory for the Patriot forces. Just before the end of the campaigning season, Washington crushed forces led by British General Charles Cornwallis and began the process of rolling the British back out of New Jersey. Even with the Patriots in disarray, they could still take the fight to the British and win. As the campaigning season of 1777 began, it was the British who took the initiative, launching two major campaigns against Patriot forces. London had by this time recognized that New England would be the toughest nut to crack, whereas Loyalist support was higher in the mid-Atlantic and southern colonies. Seeking to take advantage of this, the British divided their forces into two separate attacks. One, led by General John Burgoyne, would capture Albany in the Hudson River Valley, cutting New England off from the other colonies, while the other, led by General Howe, would attack the Patriot capital at Philadelphia, where the Continental Congress had returned after Washington's victories in New Jersey. With these two decisive moves, it was hoped the British would crush the Patriots in the South and be able to concentrate all their forces on an attack against New England. The ill-fated Saratoga campaign would, however, fail to accomplish its goals. When General Burgoyne advanced from Quebec along Lake Champlain, Patriot forces under General Horatio Gates fought bitterly to prevent them from capturing the Hudson River. At the decisive Battle of Saratoga in September, Gates dealt Burgoyne a crushing defeat, capturing much of his army and forcing Burgoyne to surrender, ending the British campaign in the north. General Howe's forces failed better in the Philadelphia campaign, although they too faced bitter resistance from Washington's troops. As Burgoyne surrendered, Howe was marching into Philadelphia, expecting the Patriots to simply surrender and give up. Instead, Washington and the Continental Congress simply retreated, Washington to Valley Forge and the Congress to York, Pennsylvania. The American Revolutionary War would continue far longer than either side expected. As the Patriots fought their war against Britain, they also sent emissaries and letters across the world to gain outside support for their war. Revolutionaries and freedom fighters, as well as military advisors from across Europe, arrived to aid the Patriots in their struggle. The Marquis de Lafayette, a young French noble with ideas of liberty and enlightened government in his head, arrived in the colonies in June of 1777 and was wounded during the Philadelphia campaign, quickly reaching hero status among the Patriot soldiers. The year before, Polish revolutionary Tadeusz Kosciuszko arrived to join the Continental Army and aided significantly in setting up defenses that won the Battle of Saratoga in September of 1777. Even a Prussian army general, Baron von Steuben, arrived in the colonies after a reduction in his salary to help train the Continental Army at Valley Forge into a force capable of resisting and winning against the British regulars. Perhaps the greatest help for the revolutionaries would, if successfully secured, come from the French crown itself. Since 1776, the Patriots had been able to secure small secret shipments of weapons and money from France, whose new king Louis XVI wanted to bring his rival in George III down after France's humiliating defeat in the French and Indian War. Thomas Jefferson, a leading delegate of the Continental Congress, was a fierce advocate of America joining the anti-British alliance established by France and Spain after the end of the last war in order to secure the Patriots' chances of victory. Already, many in France were sympathetic towards the revolutionaries, and calls for overt support to them came from across the nation. Opposing them, however, was Anne Robert Jacques Turgot, the Controller General of Finances for the French crown. The French and Indian War, in combination with the wider 7 Years' War across all of its various fronts, had destroyed France's finances and sunk it into deep debt. Even as support for the Patriots grew, Turgot pleaded with King Louis to avoid getting into another ruinous war with Britain. Even if they won, he argued, the kingdom's finances would be utterly destroyed, and France would never financially recover. By the end of 1777, despite Patriot victories against the British in the Saratoga campaign, Turgot could point to the capture of the Patriot capital at the same time to demonstrate the futility of aiding the Patriots. By 1778, French shipments of material aid had decreased from 1777. By 1780, it had ceased entirely. France would not be participating in the Patriot struggle for independence. If they were going to win this war, they would win it alone. Did you enjoy the video? Be sure to leave a like and subscribe to let me know to continue with this series. If you have ideas for other videos, be sure to let me know in the comments. Bye for now.